impact on how that number is reduced, not how it is increased. I thank my colleagues for their patience. They certainly don't have to request time from me. I will yield back and gladly allow them whatever of their own time they'd like to take. I yield the floor.
Go ahead.
I want to be
Senator from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to say to the Senator from North Carolina before he leaves the floor that I am well aware of his longstanding commitment to education issues and to the kids in this country. I have no doubt of that, and I hope you didn't take anything I said to suggest that. And I actually think the two of us probably share a lot of agreement on what we ought to be doing. My issue is simply with and as I said about the Senator from Kentucky, he has every right to do it. My issue is that, like you and other members of the committee, I want to engage in a discussion and debate on the bill. And I want to consider your amendments and his amendments and offer my own. And I am painfully aware, having been in the school system, that Congress was supposed to reauthorize this bill in 2007. It's 4 years later because of our own fecklessness, our own inability to get anything done, that every single year teachers and parents and principals keep having to put up with what is the crudest accountability system I could imagine. The only thing cruder than the accountability system was the response of big school districts like the one I used to work in to that accountability as people tried to comply with well-intentioned but incredibly poorly thought through laws and regulations from Washington, D.C. And I don't want them to have to endure one more year of this meaningless accountability where, we're comparing this year's fourth graders to last year's fourth graders and telling ourselves that actually makes a difference. There's a lot of good work being done in our states right now around standards, elevating them. So we quit fooling ourselves about whether we're meeting international norms when it comes to our kids. There's a lot of great work being done in Colorado and other states that have come along to creating a growth model so that we can actually track, not we, but moms and dads and teachers and principals can actually track how this group of fifth graders did compared to how they did as fourth graders, compared to how they did as third graders, and compare them to similarly situated kids all across the state and the country. That makes all the sense in the world compared to what we currently have. But I sat out there in absolute despair, wondering why this town was so mean to our teachers and to our kids. Isn't it a bare minimum that you could reauthorize the legislation when you're supposed to in 2007? And now we find ourselves here. I thought the Senator from North Carolina was very eloquent this morning and today on the floor as well. And I appreciated the points that he made. My objection is a narrow one, which is the idea that the right way to approach reauthorizing No Child Left Behind, the right way to approach trying to fix this situation is to create a bunch of procedural barriers that don't allow us to have a substantive discussion about it. And I agree completely with what the Senator from North Carolina said a minute ago. There is a reason we have not a 15% approval rating, but a 12% approval rating. There's a reason. And I think that if we could come together in a bipartisan way, reauthorize this bill, get rid of AYP, do some of the important things in this legislation, I hope the Senator will look at one of my amendments, because one of my amendments has your pharmacist in mind. If only we could get to a discussion of the merits of this bill. And so I hope, and the Senator from Kentucky has left the floor, I hope that my only objective in coming down here today was simply to implore him to withdraw that objection, knowing it's his right to do it. But I can't think of why you would do it if you wanted to change the trajectory of the work from the federal level. So I thank the Senator from North Carolina, the Senator from Minnesota, and I will yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. President, I also respect my good friend from North Carolina. I want to thank you for your vote on my amendment today. And I think you're going to like some of my other amendments, too. I just want to take issue with one thing you said, and I think you said it in a moment where if you thought about what you said, you probably might reconsider it. And you said that, I had said that I've spent more time probably on this bill than on any other. And I've spent a lot of time on the Affordable Care Act. And you said that if I had spent more time on this bill than any other, that's pathetic. And it's a pathetic commentary, or a sad commentary, because we just got this bill the other day. The fact of the matter is, and I think the Senator would acknowledge this, that work on any piece of legislation doesn't start when the bill is introduced. My work on this bill started very soon after I arrived in the Senate. It started with a bill that I co-authored with Orrin Hatch. And that's going to be an amendment. It's an amendment to recruit and train principals for high-needs schools. Because we've had schools that I've seen turned around by principals. Principals can create the ethos of a school. They have so much to do with selecting the teachers and transforming a school. And this would create a program where we recruit people who want to be principals in high-needs schools and have them mentored, if they haven't been a principal before, by a principal who successfully turned around a high-needs school. That started immediately upon my getting here to the Senate. I have been going back to my state and traveling around the state of Minnesota, talking to teachers and superintendents and principals. The senator from North Carolina talked about the need to have superintendents and principals and teachers here. We had hearings. We had 10 hearings. I believe there was the other side that said, please stop the hearings at that point. He talked about the transformation models, which I do have problems with. What do you do with the school that's failed? What are you going to do now with the school that's in the bottom 5%? But if the senator from South Carolina was there, a superintendent, Joel Klein, superintendent of schools or chancellor of the schools in New York, spoke exactly to the transformation models. And again, what works in New York certainly doesn't work in Pine City, Minnesota, or parts of North Carolina. You have plenty of teachers available and plenty of principals available in New York City. So I think you need more flexibility in transformation models than in this bill than Joel Klein suggests, and maybe that's in the manager's bill now. But Joel Klein is a superintendent, and he spoke to the transformation models, and he said that the transformation models gave him the ability to fix schools that were failing, schools that were dropout factories. So the very thing we've been asked for here, let's have testimony from superintendents. Aren't these transformation models surreal? We've had these hearings. And I would suggest to the senator from Kentucky who has just came in, my office will print out the transcripts of all the hearings we had. And you can read what teachers and principals and superintendents have said. We really, and I just have to say that the work that you do on these bills doesn't start when the bill hits the desk. In my case, it started 2 years before. And, you know, I don't think the senator actually meant.
Would the senator yield for 1 second?
For a question, sure.
If the senator interpreted my comments to be personally targeted at him, then I do apologize. The senator said, and I wrote it down, I spent more time on this bill than any other bill ever. My criticism about the statement was, I said, if the senator got the bill when I did, then there's not a whole lot of time between Friday when I got the bill and Wednesday when it was marked up. I don't question for a minute that the senator from Minnesota or his staff has spent a tremendous amount of hours on education. But in defense of Senator Paul and what he has sought, is there has not been a hearing on this legislation. There are some things in this 868-page bill that our committee has not had a hearing on that it would be great to have the opportunity to ask someone who is an education professional. In the absence of the ability to do that, you, I, Senator from Kentucky, our staffs all have to rely on what committee staff tells us, and that is not always the most accurate thing regardless of which side of the aisle you're seeking that information. So I appreciate what the senator from Minnesota has said. I think that education should be a passionate debate, and we've seen some passion here this afternoon. And I would hope that the senator from Minnesota would suggest to Senator Harkin, maybe there's a pathway where we can get predictability in the number of amendments, predictability in the time it takes to mark this up, with some accommodation to the sensitivities that Senator Rand and Paul and others have raised, because I hope that the senator from Minnesota would agree with me. There is not an urgency to do this week. And if we could, when we come back from the end of October, have a hearing, I think we could have a pathway to markup and completion. Having said that, it probably will be a product that I couldn't support. I will aggressively try to amend, and I would be anxious and hopeful that I would have the opportunity again on the floor to try to affect its content. But if the senator will be an advocate for that, I think that there is a pathway that doesn't in any way, shape, or form delay our ability in this institution to conference with the House or to present the President a bill. I would be more concerned with whether we produce the right product, and I think we can achieve that better. And I thank the gentleman for yielding to me.
Certainly, and obviously, I believe that in the markup we will have the discussion and healthy discussion of every part of this bill and of every amendment. And I think the senator from North Carolina is going to be so thrilled with my amendments that at the end of the day he's going to not just cast an aye vote on the bill, but an enthusiastic one. I accept your apology. I don't think you said exactly what you said. So what you said was, if the senator spent, and it's not worth going into. The point is that you work on a bill doesn't start when you get the bill, when a piece of legislation is written. Most of the work comes before. And I just want everyone to understand that who is listening. And I can't, This bill has been a tremendous passion of mine. You mentioned passion for success. I want the growth model. We had Senator Bennett, who was superintendent of the Denver schools, and a very successful one. When I did my principal bill, I went to a school in St. Paul, Minnesota, Dayton's Bluff, which had been a failed school, and was turned around by a successful principal. And that principal, so I had a round table there. This is very early in my tenure here. And one of the principals said, you know, those No Child Left Behind tests, we call them autopsies. And what he meant was you take them at the end of the year, you take them in late April, and you don't get the results till the kids are out of school, and then the results are aggregated. In Minnesota, we have something in Minnesota that the teachers, superintendents, and principals agree on. This something called the NWEA tests. What are those? They're computer adaptive tests. What does that mean? In Minnesota, very often they take these 3 times a year. They're computer tests, so the teachers get the results right away. The principal called the No Child Left Behind test autopsies because the kids are out of school. The teacher can't use it to inform instruction. If you do a computer test, you get it right away, the teacher can use the test to inform their instruction. I think that's what most parents thought we were doing here in the first place when President Bush first suggested this whole thing. Secondly, they're adaptive. What does that mean? Well, that means if a kid gets question right, keeps getting questions right, the questions get harder. If they start getting questions wrong, they get easier. It's much more diagnostic. And you can see exactly where a child is. Right now, the No Child Left Behind tests forbid these assessments from going outside grade level. Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education, said something really profound. He said that a 6th grade teacher who takes a kid from a 3rd grade level of reading to a 5th grade level is a success, is a great teacher. But under No Child Left Behind, the way it is now, that teacher is a failure. That makes no sense whatsoever. We have to measure growth. That's what the senator from Colorado was talking about. We need to measure growth. And that's no mystery. I go around schools I remember being in a school in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and I was introduced by the principal to the teacher, one teacher of the year, a math teacher. And I met the math teacher, and the math teacher said, growth. This is not a mystery. And we've had hearings on this, and we know this. We need to be measuring how much kids grow. And that will help kids that are from poor schools, because they're starting at a lower level. But if the school is good and they're increasing their growth, they'll be rewarded. My daughter graduated from college. I'm looking at the pages now, who are juniors in high school. My daughter immediately out of college became a teacher at a school in the Bronx. 97% free and reduced price lunches. 3rd grade teacher. She had to take her kids, that's the first year they do No Child Left Behind testing. She had to take her kids from here to here to this arbitrary level of proficiency in order to be considered a success. Where 15 miles to the north, a teacher in Westchester had to take her kids from here to here. That doesn't make any sense. In Minnesota, I learned from my teachers that I talked to that there's something called the race to the middle. What's that? Well, No Child Left Behind, the way it works now, is that there's an arbitrary bar of proficiency that a teacher is judged on. And what percentage of their kids in these different subgroups meet or exceed that bar of proficiency? Well, you know what? The smartest kid or the smartest kid in the class, that kid's going to pass no matter what. There's nothing you can do to that kid that won't make that kid exceed the bar of proficiency. So guess what? Teacher ignores that kid. Kid at the bottom, most challenged kid, well, no way that kid's going to make it, so let's ignore that kid. Race to the middle. Kids right at the below and right above proficiency, those are the kids that are drilled and killed, as they call it in Minnesota. We know what's wrong with No Child Left Behind. We've been discussing it for a year and a half in hearings. We've been talking about it. I've been talking to the ranking member. He mentioned today these computer adaptive tests in the hearing, or in the markup. These things aren't mysteries. Members were welcome to come to the hearing. Some didn't come. But the work on a bill doesn't start the day the bill hits the table. The work of a senator, if a senator is a hard-working senator, is every day. And it's going back to your state and finding out what teachers and principals and superintendents need. And it's going to the hearings. And it's talking to the other members, and to the chairman, to the ranking member, and to your staff. And your staff is getting information from other staffers. And from not just the committee staff, but from other staffers. I just don't want to leave this, the people with the impression that we work once the bill hits the table. So, Mr. President, I yield the floor and would suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Senators continuing their work on federal spending at this hour. Right now, they're in the midst of a quorum call. Senators focusing on those three appropriations bills that are rolled into one: agriculture, commerce, justice, and transportation and HUD spending. Majority Leader Reid hopes to have work done on that by the end of this week. Now, also sometime this week, we could see votes on President Obama's jobs program. Earlier this week, Majority Leader Reid introduced the first part of the retooled bill. It's $35 billion to hire teachers and first responders. This segment of the president's plan is the first of several parts that he wants to have approved, as the bill is in its entirety failed last week in the Senate. Now, earlier, senators approved by two judicial nominations. Unanimous consent, Senators approved by unanimous consent two judicial nominations, and they voted to confirm Robert David Mariani to be U.S. District Judge for the Middle District of Pennsylvania. They also tabled an amendment by Senator McCain related to the federal spending legislation that they've been working on.
the senior senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection, the senator is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Peter Wisner, a detailee from the Treasury Department, be given privileges of the floor during the consideration of H.R. 2112.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I would like to speak to two amendments, not call them up, but speak to two amendments, if I could. One is about basic civil rights and fair housing organizations, and the other is about counseling. And I would like to speak on both amendments, Mr. President. Our nation's fair housing organizations help enforce basic civil rights, something that has been important in this country for many years. They investigate housing discrimination. They educate tenants and homeowners of their rights. They fight the pernicious discrimination that targets and redlines low-income Americans and communities of color. Housing discrimination not only violates our laws, it's a barrier to economic mobility. That's why the Department of Housing and Urban Development invests in the Fair Housing Initiatives program, which supports fair housing groups across the country. They investigate mortgage lending fraud and predatory lending. They investigate foreclosure cases that force homeowners out of their homes, an endemic problem in the presiding officer state of Maryland, my state of Ohio, and across the country, before facts and underlying rights are observed. Simply put, FHIP helps the very organizations that educate the public and enforce the laws that protect people from housing discrimination. The program's cost-effective, saving HUD money as it streamlines government resources to more effectively and efficiently investigate complaints. Fair housing organizations investigated 65% of the nation's complaints of housing discrimination, nearly twice as many as all agencies combined. Fair housing advocates in Cincinnati, in Dayton, in Toledo, in Cleveland, in Akron, in Columbus, in towns across Appalachia, Ohio, fight predatory lenders. For millions of Americans, the barrier to opportunity and security is the latent discrimination of ruthless landlords and unscrupulous lenders. Without FHIP, our country and our economy are subject to the very discrimination that not only hurts individual renters and homeowners, but holds too many communities back. That's why I'm offering this amendment to restore full funding to FHIP in line with the House level. State and federal fair housing enforcement is already stretched thin. In my home state, the State Civil Rights Commission has only 4 investigators devoted to housing complaints. It'd be devastating to cut private fair housing programs any further. This amendment is supported by the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, NAACP, the National Council of La Raza, the National Fair Housing Alliance. It's supported by Ohio organizations like Dayton's Miami Valley Fair Housing Center, Neighborhood Housing Services of Greater Cleveland, the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio, the Ohio CDC Association, the Toledo Fair Housing Association, and the Homeownership Center of Greater Dayton. On Sunday, Mr. President, the Martin Luther King Senior Memorial was officially dedicated at our National Mall. It's a reminder that the era of blatant Jim Crow laws and brutal beatings and segregation may in fact be over, but that our fight to remove the stains and the strains of discrimination all too often continues through thousands of fair housing, or continues through the fight to remove those stains, continues through thousands of fair housing organizations who serve millions of our fellow Americans. It continues with this body investing in these organizations. Mr. President, that's the First Amendment. I also would ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, I mentioned the endorsements of many organizations. This is a letter from those organizations, civil rights organizations supportive of our legislation. I'd like to enter this into the record with unanimous consent.
Objection will be included in the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to speak on a Second Amendment also, Mr. President. Since a peak in 2006, housing prices, as we know in this country, have fallen by nearly a third. Total homeowner equity slashed in half, with a loss of more than $7 trillion. Some 6 million people have lost homes since the height of the financial crisis. Yet just yesterday we heard a leading Republican presidential candidate tell an editorial board in Nevada that his solution to the nation's housing crisis is to speed up to speed up the rate of foreclosures. This despite clear evidence that basic legal requirements have often been ignored, in foreclosure proceedings. This despite clear evidence that some banks have specifically targeted certain communities and specific neighborhoods for foreclosure. This despite the fact that persistent foreclosures are dragging down property values across the nation. I remember some years ago in Cleveland, and Cuyahoga County and my state have had more foreclosures, except for the moratorium year last year, had more foreclosures every year than the year before for the last 14 years. And I remember neighborhoods in Cleveland where there might be only a couple of foreclosures on a street, but we knew what happened when those homes would be foreclosed on. First, what would obviously happen on vandalism and stripping off the aluminum siding and stealing the pipes, and the property would be degraded and the property would be ignored, and what happened to other homes in the neighborhood and what happened to the prices of and the values of those homes, even though people were paying their mortgage and staying in their homes. And this statement to the Nevada newspaper, this despite the fact that a clear message from my distinguished colleagues, Senator McCain of Arizona, Senator Nelson of Florida, representing states like Ohio that have been devastated by high rates of foreclosure. Earlier this week, my colleagues stood on this floor that we need to do, some colleagues said we need to do more to give people a mortgage that they can afford to make the payments on rather than throwing them out of their homes. I couldn't agree more. If we're going to strengthen our economy, we must find a stronger response to the foreclosure crisis, not rushing the process, but better managing it. And right now, the provision of homeowner counseling is one of the most effective ways we have to deal with this crisis. I remember talking to fair housing coalitions and consular organizations in Toledo and Dayton and all over my state, telling how they were able, one family at a time, to avert foreclosure. And we know what that means, not just to that family, but to that community, because they were able to do foreclosure counseling. I've seen firsthand in my state how these programs help better manage a mortgage payment process that helps to keep homeowners in their homes. Organizations like the Neighborhood Services of Greater Cleveland, the Columbus Housing Partnership, the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio, CO-Ohio, are leaders in foreclosure counseling. The Department of Housing and Urban Affairs invests in the Housing Counseling Assistance Program that supports these Ohio programs and hundreds of thousands like them across the country. Housing counselors provide guidance and assistance and advice to help families meet the responsibilities of tenancy and home ownership. Foreclosure counseling is particularly valuable to those obviously in danger of losing their homes. According to a study by the Urban Institute, homeowners who are assisted by mortgage counselors have a 60% better chance of saving their homes. Think of that. If you have counseling with a professional counselor, somebody to advocate for you and assist you, there's a 60% better chance you have of saving your home than if you don't have that assistance. HUD has requested $88 million for housing counseling for each of the last 2 fiscal years. Yet last year, Congress provided no money for this important program, a program that keeps people in their homes, helps their neighbors because this house might not be foreclosed on, helps those families build equity and savings that are essential for stable houses, stable families, stable homes, stable neighborhoods, stable communities. Given this lack of funding, I'm particularly grateful for the work done by the subcommittee chair and ranking member in restoring funding for this program. Special thanks to Senator Murray and Senator Collins. Subcommittees worked hard to find $60 million to fund the program. I applaud them for their efforts. Senator Sanders has also been a great champion of this effort. Yet even with this level of funding, the demand for housing counseling exceeds the level of services that would be supported. It's imperative we provide these investments. They are necessary to meet the needs of the record number of homeowners facing foreclosure. They're necessary to help advise borrowers preparing to purchase new homes. And they are necessary and vital to our housing economic recovery. We know to pull ourselves out of recession historically in this country, we need a vibrant manufacturing sector, especially driven by auto, and we need housing in more home construction, more home renovation, appreciation of housing prices to pull ourselves out of recession. We're doing okay on the one with auto and manufacturing. We're not doing nearly well enough for housing. I applaud my colleagues for their work on this. I appreciate their support for this program. I look forward to their supporting the Senate number in conference when it gets to conference. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senior senator from Maryland.
I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
How you doing, buddy?
Thank you.